Welcome to In the Black, the podcast that shines a light on resilience, transformation, and the power of reinvention. I'm Araceli, and each week, my co-host Shannon and I sit down with incredible women who have faced some of life's hardest challenges, from personal setbacks to societal obstacles, and have emerged on the other side stronger, driven, and ready to make a difference.
On In the Black, we celebrate these stories of strength and success, diving deep into the journeys of women who turned pain into purpose, adversity into action, and now dedicate themselves to making the world a better place in their own way. They're here to inspire, share hard-earned wisdom, and remind us all, no matter how dark things may seem, life is cyclical and dawn is coming. So whether you're looking for inspiration, motivation, or just a reminder that change is always possible, this is the podcast for you. Welcome to In the Black.
Today's guest embodies transformation in its rawest, most inspiring form. After being diagnosed with terminal pulmonary fibrosis and lupus, Dr. Xenia's life took a dramatic turn, not toward despair, but toward purpose. Forced to leave behind a traditional career, she stepped into the world of healing and advocacy, using her own pain as fuel to guide others through theirs. Dr. Xenia is the author of deeply resonant works, including Grieving to Heal, The Shadowboarding Experience, The Recondition, A Guide to Loving Yourself Through the Trauma, and its accompanying workbook. These are more than books. They are lifelines, practical tools designed to help people move through trauma, reconnect with their inner self, and rediscover self-worth. In today's episode, you'll learn how trauma can become a catalyst for growth, what it takes to shift from suffering to service, and how healing work isn't just personal. It's a ripple that can touch communities. Whether you're navigating chronic illness, deep loss, or just feeling disconnected, this conversation will offer you insight, hope, and a powerful reminder your pain has a purpose.
Ooh, I can't wait for this one. Thank you so much for joining us today. Tell us a little more about you and where you're at right now.
As you mentioned, I am not only a published author, I am also a social behavioral scientist, which means I study human behavior. I am a motivational speaker and a community activist. I wear a lot of hats. I am from Brooklyn, New York, born and raised, and I am using my voice to help heal others and to give a voice to those who feel like their voices have been on mute.
Can you take us back to the moment you were diagnosed with pulmonary fibrosis and lupus?
Absolutely. This is something that often runs in my mind. Um, Good days and bad days. It continuously raises different questions for myself. Back in 2021, I was going to, and this was in like the height of COVID. So I had been going to the doctor numerous times and saying like, I don't feel like myself. Something is wrong. I'm walking. Start back. I have been an avid gym goer. So I was going to the gym like 3 times out of the week. I was super active. Dean of students in school and middle school at that. So that should tell you how much movement that I had to do throughout the day with teenagers, right? So I was going to the doctor and I was saying something is wrong. I just don't feel like myself, and I was always met with some type of uncertainty. Where like maybe it's your weight, or maybe it's your allergies, or maybe it's asthma, and I was not being tested for anything. So automatically I started feeling dismissed. And then I went to the office to pick up something. This is at the time when we were still working remotely, but I needed to go to the school to switch out my laptop. And I walked up maybe 3 steps and I immediately got dizzy and felt like I was about to pass out. So I went to the urgent care that was not too far from where I was working at the time, and the cough that I was having was so loud that from the back of urgent care, the doctor came immediately to the front and was like, "Who is that?" They don't have to check in, do the triage later, send them immediately to my office. So when I got to the office, the doctor was like, "When was the last time you had a chest X-ray?" And he went through the different things. He did an X-ray and he seen that I had pneumonia in both of my lungs. So he said, "Have you not been going to the doctor? Did you know that you had pneumonia?" And I said, "I've been going to the doctor, but no one has done a chest X-ray." So he put me on some steroids. He gave me the CD from the exam and said, "If you don't feel better in a day or two with the medication, go to the emergency room and give them the scan." So I went. I got home. I wasn't home for even an hour, and then I collapsed on the floor. Luckily, my friend came in behind me and found me passed out on the floor. Had to call them EMS. They got me to the hospital. Again, they still wasn't diagnosing me properly. They were saying, "Oh yes, we see pneumonia. Maybe you had COVID," and I was saying I never had COVID. So again, being misdiagnosed. So they said, "We're going to treat you as if you do have COVID because we don't understand what's going on." Fast forward, I was in the hospital for about 3 weeks. Fast forward after that, I go to see another specialist, completely different from my doctor. I was like, maybe let me go see a completely different doctor in a different network. And that doctor diagnosed me with pulmonary fibrosis. He asked me had I been smoking. He did a lung exam. I said, "I've never been a smoker." So he couldn't understand like what was going on. He took the scan, and when the scans came back, he said that I had my lungs looked like the lungs of a smoker who had been smoking for 80 years. He said it looked like that's how cloudy my lungs were. And he was saying that that's when he mentioned that it was pulmonary fibrosis. And then he explained to me, I was like, "You have to explain what that is. I've never heard of it." And so he explained to me that what pulmonary fibrosis is that it's a terminal lung disease, it's irreversible. And what it is that your lungs begin to harden, and that hardened portion cannot be reversed. So at the time, when that happened, I had 40% functionability between both of my lungs, and then it just began to rapidly decline. It just began to rapidly decline, and then I was in and out of the hospital. I was in and out of the hospital for months, and they still couldn't figure out how I got it until they did a little deeper digging, and then we found thought back to my history, and it was like, "Oh, I was going to school across the street from the Twin Towers during 9/11." And so, being that I was constantly in that area working and going to school, that's how this had begun to develop within my body. However, I always had the question to your answer about how I feel. I always had the question of if I wasn't dismissed by those doctors early on, and if they had been checking into like doing different exams, checking into my history, maybe they would have caught this earlier on, and I wouldn't be at the stage where I am now, where I need a double lung transplant. So I am constantly up and down, highs and lows, because I'm always thinking about what could have been done differently if I wasn't one dismissed as a woman, two dismissed as a woman of color, and then three communicated with a doctor, communicated me and saw me and my illness rather just seeing his biases of what he thought probably was wrong with me based off my size.
Mm. That is unfortunately such a common story. I think I read a statistic once that it takes 7 years for most women to be diagnosed with a chronic condition. And that's just absolutely ridiculous to me.
Yeah,
It
and
sucks.
so and so 7 years for a woman in general to be diagnosed, right? But women of color are 2.3 times more likely to be misdiagnosed just because of the fact, and research shows that just because of the fact that we are often met with the idea of that we either have high blood pressure, or because we're women of color, or our background, our history, there has to be some type of underlying condition that's related to people of color without us being truly assessed, and seeing how like with the proper blood test, with the proper x-rays, mammograms, and all those things. So we're often pushed to the side and being misdiagnosed because we're not being properly examined.
Yeah, I went to the hospital because I had a fever for 13 days. And the doctor, I think it was urgent it was somewhere emergency. The doctor said I just had COVID and there was nothing he can do. It just, goes away on its own. I'm like, no, it's not. Even if it is COVID, I think there's something else because I know my body, at that point it was like 10 days of having a fever and nothing could, I was putting ice bags under my armpits, between my legs, like nothing was keeping it down. And so they dismissed me. They were so rude to my husband, so rude to basically me. Um, left. Christmas was on Saturday. So then I had to wait till like Monday to go to urgent care. Went to urgent care, saw a nurse practitioner, immediately checked my lungs and it was pneumonia. Got the medicine for that and my fever went away instantly. And I recovered quick. Not after having damage in my lungs because they dismissed me. But yeah, it's frustrating, the healthcare system a lot of times. Dr. Xenia, what was going through your mind?
So what was going through my mind during that time? Um, there was a lot of confusion, there was a lot of frustration, there was a lot of disappointment, but most of all, there was a lot of fear because I was uncertain of what was happening. I was I was being constantly traumatized because no matter how much I was saying what I was feeling, I was continuously being dismissed. I was expressing shortness of breath, shortness of shortness of breath. How I had to for weeks walk hunched over, practically with my arms crossed, crunching my chest. It was so painful to cough. It was so painful to stand. Like even standing on my own just felt like someone put a, a sack of bricks on my back. And I couldn't even stand straight up. So it was that pain. I didn't want to go to the bathroom because I didn't want to have to get out of the bed to even try to make my way to the bathroom. It was so much body aches and pain. And then even when I was expressing that to the doctors, I don't know in their mind what they thought, but it was like, well, we've given you what we normally give people who have your type of symptoms. We've given you Motrin. We've given you ibuprofen. So they named all these things they were giving me, and I was saying it's not working with the pain. I need something stronger. And they were refusing in the beginning to give me something stronger. And I would say, I don't have a history of drug abuse. I don't have a history of addiction. Like, I don't understand why won't you give me something stronger? And I'm explaining the amount of pain that I am. So it was just so much frustration and there was so much fear because I thought I was dying. I literally felt like, and I literally thought that I was dying. And this was the beginning stages before they even said that, I may not make it within over 6 months. So leading up to that, can you imagine no one having the answers, so many different specialists coming in to see you, and everyone's coming back and saying, well, we ran all the tests that we can run, so we're just going to send you home with antibiotics because we've done all that we can do here. And it's like, did you really do all that you can do? I feel like there's more exams that you can do, and if you're unsure about what's going on, why are you sending me home to say if I don't feel better in 2 or 3 days to come back? I'm not going to feel better in 2 or 3 days because I'm telling you I don't feel better. So it was again frustration. It was heartache. It was stress. It was trauma. It was fear, all boiled up into one. So much to I was even afraid to fall asleep because I was afraid that would this be my last time opening my eyes, and that trauma being one person feeling that, but then also I'm a mom. So that was another set of trauma that was brought on because I was so afraid that my son would find me dead because no one was answering anything, and that fear and alone added on to the fear that I was already feeling from being misdiagnosed and no one actually giving me any hope and saying that they knew what was going on.
How old was your son when you were going through this?
At the time, my son was 21.
21. Okay. Yeah, I went through a similar situation in 2018 where I ended up misdiagnosed and medication put me in the hospital for 36 days.
Mm-hmm.
And my babies were little at that point in time. So I'm very thankful for my friendships that I had there. But um, yeah, it makes it hard when you have kids and you're like, I'm trying to fight this, I'm trying to figure out what's going on. Um, and it makes it so much harder. And I don't know, are you a single mom?
Yes, I'm a single mom. We co-parent very well together. But my son is old. My son is was at the time was 21, but it's also the idea that he's seen his mom be so strong for so many years. This is the first time he's ever seen me sick like this. So it was puzzling even for him because he's like, wait a minute, we literally weeks ago were just laughing and joking and hanging out and having like a fun family night, and then just like that, I can't even walk from the couch to the bathroom without assistance. So that was a shock all in itself to him. And this is after we had just beginning to find our footing after losing my only nephew to gun violence. And we were just going through that stages of grief and finding our balance in the footing where we began to even start to welcome laughter back into the household. So to go from a set of depression to finally start getting in the space where we're finding ourselves again and we're beginning to find joy in life again, and then this to just happen out of nowhere. It was very emotional, it was very triggering, and it was very traumatizing for the whole entire family.
Yeah, that goes along with our next question very well because you know, a diagnosis like that, it does affect your identity, career, your daily life. Can you give us some of the ways that those things were affected by this diagnosis and by going through this?
Absolutely. So it was affected in so many ways, which is what led me to begin writing some of the books that I wrote. Because one, being diagnosed and now being fully disabled, right? I began to have to fight for my job. I began because I wasn't able to show up the way people were so used to me showing up, and I wasn't able to show up in the way that the work in a way that others wanted me to show up, not necessarily need me because I was still doing the work, but I needed to do it remotely. It became a big rift with the are you going to be capable to do certain things based on the way preference was, right? Preference is the best way to say it. So now I was battling, not only battling against things that I was already battling against, being a woman of color. uh, Now I'm battling of being a woman of color, and someone with a disability. So now so now I have three things I'm battling against, and I found myself fighting so hard to express and to show my capabilities, to show my competency in a role that I was already successfully doing for years. It's like now all those things are being questioned. And that had a big part on me getting my rapid decline with my health because I was burning so much energy trying to prove my capability to others that I didn't have enough energy to pour into myself, and it had gotten to a point where I had to say I have to put my health first. I have to put my health first because this is not conducive to my healing process. And that it warped into me writing the book Grieving to Heal because I began to understand that I needed to grieve the old version of myself so that I can open myself up to for whatever was coming next. But I also felt alone, if that makes sense to you. I felt alone because I was the only person in my family who had this. Um, and so I didn't know how to convey the help that I needed from the people around me, but they also didn't know how to help me as well because, again, I'm the first person in my family that was going through this. So this was new to us all. And it got me to thinking there has to be other people out there who's experiencing this. And so I started journaling my journey down. And I started writing the things down and writing the things I was feeling and my triggers, my challenges, how I was able to come through certain things. And that helped me to start to write my book, Grieving to Heal, because I had to, like I said, I had to grieve. I had to grieve things that I could no longer do. I had to grieve the understanding that my life was changing. My life was changing in split seconds, rapidly. But I also had to recognize, if I didn't let go of the things or the expectations that others had for me, then I would do more harm to myself mentally, emotionally, and physically. And so, again, that's a part of what my book Grieving to Heal is about, because in grieving those things, I was able to heal. I was able to heal spiritually, and I was able to heal emotionally, and allowed myself time to process what was going on.
So, at what point did you shift from simply surviving to wanting to turn your experience into something greater? Was there a specific moment or realization that pushed you to start writing and sharing your story?
Yes, it was, and I'm glad you asked
Okay.
that. So, one day I was on the phone. I was on the phone with my therapist, and I was just sharing how the point where I realized that I'm going to have to. My job was already trying to force me out, and I had to make a decision on, was I going to continue to fight, and say like, "Hey, I can do this work. Please don't, don't get rid of me," or was I going to say my health mattered more and just be okay with going on disability? Um, and so, in talking through those things with my therapist, I realized it was like this calm that came over me, and I realized, you know what, I have to put myself first, because she was helping me to understand that I still had to live for myself, but I also had to live for my son. My son was still young. My son is still counting on me, and so when putting things in perspective in that way. It was like, yes, like I'm trying to be here for everyone else. I'm trying to be here for an employer who's already ready to replace me. Is already ready to replace me. And it's like, why is that more important than myself? So it was that. And ironically, I took about 12 steps out of the room, and I collapsed on the floor. Um, and when I woke up, or at least when I came to, my mom was crying. She was holding my hands, and she was saying, "Please come back to me, come back to me, come back to me." And so, what I later found out after I was rushed to emergencies, that I had passed away, and they had to revive me. And they got me to the hospital. They had me on a ventilator. And in my process of all the time that I was questioning, and I was saying, I really don't feel like people love me. I feel like people tolerate me. And it was just an overwhelming amount of people that were coming in to say their goodbyes, because at that time the doctors were saying they didn't think I was going to make it through the night. And it was like a voice came and said, you have to let some things go so I can show you where I need you to be now. And my son looked back at me and he said, "You can't go because you have so much more work to do." And I feel like that was my moment. That was my turning point. That was my turning point when I said, okay, there's something happening here, and there's a reason why I'm still here, because they're already saying I wasn't going to make it. And here I am. We made it to the hospital. They had me on a ventilator. The next morning, they were saying like, if I was able to continue to keep my blood pressure down, then they would be able to take me off the ventilator. So there were so many things that was happening, and it took a few days, but they ended up putting me in ICU. But slowly, my strength started coming back, and I realized that I was meant to do something different. And in that moment, I realized that I was meant to share my story, because there are other people who are battling disabilities. There are other people who are battling invisible disabilities, and there are other people who do not have or have not found a tribe of people that says it's okay. It's okay to feel overwhelmed. It's okay to be sick. It's okay to ask for help. Um, and it's okay to be different, as long as you're doing the work to understand and fall in love with yourself. You can get through anything. And so that's what I've been doing. I made a promise that if God spared me, that I would continue to use my voice to help others. And so since then, that's exactly what I've been doing. So I believe that time in the hospital, and that I believe that day is the day that showed me, it was my changing point. It was my turning point when I realized emotionally, spiritually, and mentally that I was meant to do more, and it was time for me to close that old chapter in my life.
How freaking beautiful. I gosh, there's so many things that I was like, oh, I need to bring that back around. I need to bring that back around. But really, I want to go back to your book real quick. So,
Okay.
as you're starting that, you said that it's kind of your healing process to write that. And can you talk a little bit more about like where that came from and really how that process, being creative,
Mhm.
was healing to you? Because I experienced something very similar with my art, and now I'm going through like childhood trauma and writing poetry book and different things like that. And I find that creativity has its own healing value. And so I'm just curious, as you were writing, what you found out about yourself or how that helped you to process.
Yes, that is so true. Creative minds, I feel like that's just the way we process when we go through trauma or anything. When you have a creative mind, you usually process through your arts, right? And so, from early as I can remember from a child, when I experienced things or when I needed to navigate through certain things, I would turn music on. And I've been a dancer, so I would just dance, and like that was my escape. That's how I dealt with things that were unsettling to me or things that I was uncertain about. And so as I got older, writing became my thing. And so I would always journal things down, or I would write short stories. Never thought much of it. That was just my process. But I believe once I started becoming of age and I started studying and researching trauma and different trauma informed practices, I realized that writing things down was a sense of release. So in my book Grieving to Heal, I have something that's called brain dumping. And with brain dumping is when you just drop everything down. There's no specific order that has to be written in, but you just releasing whatever weight is on your mind, and that allows you to be able to not only sleep better, but allows you to be able to process and think better. And so that trauma informed practice was really, really detrimental to me processing all the things that I was feeling, because I was able to jot different things down when I was feeling overwhelmed and things and uncertain about things, but I was also able to go back, reflect, look at it, and identify different triggers. And when I was able to identify those triggers, I was then able to identify what was setting me, what was triggering those behaviors or those feelings, and a better way to process and how to deal with it. And so there has been numerous studies that show that your mind, when you can understand and process what's going on in your mind, you can have better control over your feelings. Once you have better control over your feelings, you have better control over your emotions and your actions. And so they all go hand in hand with each other. They go hand in hand, thoughts, feelings, actions, behaviors. And so part of me doing my research allowed me to be able to have access to that knowledge, which allowed me, which allowed me to be able to do things that other people may not have been able to do in that situation, just because I had already had that experience, and I've already been doing that type of trauma informed research from when I first was studying trauma informed practices. So those were the things that allowed me to be able to be where I am today, because I had those little tools inside my arsenal already. However, what I did find out about myself was I found out that I spent so much time solving everyone else's problems that I kept putting my own things my own trauma and things that I need to deal with on the back burner. And so those things were bubbling. They were slowly bubbling, and they would just show themselves in different spurts. You can say one simple thing to me, and it was like I was blowing off the handle, but that was just because I kept suppressing my own trauma and my own feelings to take care of everyone else's. And once I became ill, that filter wasn't there anymore, because I was already amidst in me being sick and everything that was happening. So I didn't have a buffer of the I'm okay, because I knew at that point I wasn't okay. And you are both women, so that naturally women have wear that I'm okay, I'm gonna fix it. What's going on? Don't worry, I got it, I got it, I got it. And once something comes in and strips that away from you, then you're just left with all raw feelings. So I was literally living raw feelings each and every minute, second of the day. And journaling was the only thing that kept me insane. I mean, kept me sane. But it also removed the fear of everyone else being able to come approach me because I would hear them in the kitchen. Like I would hear my family members in the kitchen, like, you go in there. No, you go in there. It's like she's still in there with the light off. But that was just my way of processing. I would have the lights off, but they didn't know I would have like my earbuds in, and I would be listening to like my gospel music, or I'll be listening to different meditation sounds. So they didn't know that. To them, it just seemed like I was sitting in the dark, but I was really just like writing and processing. But I can often hear like the discomfort, but also the concern of like somebody has to say something. And so I would write about it, and then later when I reflect, I would look and I'll say, "Oh no, baby, you have to change. You have to fix this. You have to fix this." And so that opened up a dialogue with the family. So it got to a point where I was like, "Okay, we all have to sit down and we all have to talk. We all will have to understand that this is how I process. And although you don't understand that that's how I process, I need you to respect that this is how I process, and then I need you all to tell me what it is that you need from me so I can help you better understand my process. Because when people just have an expectation of how you should process a situation, then they become upset with you because you're not processing things in the way that they want you to process. It's almost like when someone is grieving, and you have people who immediately start crying. You have some people who like just start cleaning, and then you have some people who like just go into shock and they shut down. But then you have those others who are looking from the outside and say, that person is not grieving. I didn't see them cry yet, or I didn't see, because they have this thought process of what grief looks like to them. And it's not the same for anyone. So that's a mouthful, but I say that to say it's so important to have the open lines of communication so that people can begin able to understand how each individual process and how they handle different things so they can best know how to support one another. And that's what I learned from my process of journaling things down and reflecting and doing that self inventory so that I can understand what I needed, so I can understand how to communicate to others how they could best support me.
Yeah, that's very insightful, and that you have the ability to become aware of stepping out and seeing other people's different perceived emotions in different situations. So that's really, really wonderful. The healing journey.
Yes.
So you've written several powerful books that guide people through trauma and healing. What was the process of writing them like for you, emotionally, spiritually, practically?
Okay. That is such a great question. And I would say emotionally, it was a roller coaster. It was a roller coaster. There were times when I was just like crying and writing. There was times when I was angry writing. But then there was times when there was so much joy. And I was just like jotting down things that made me laugh. Like in my book, I have a chapter that says that's called Unspoken Words. And that was at the time when I didn't have the breath to speak because I was so weak, and so I would have to write down everything I wanted to say. Even if I needed water, I would have to write it down, and like people, and my sisters and them would bring it to me, and so that's why that chapter is called Unspoken Words, because it allowed me to write down so many beautiful memories, and it also allowed me to write down different poems and things that I was already thinking that helped me navigate my emotions. So that was the emotional part of it. Spiritually, it allowed me to tap in and to my faith, and fall back in love with the essence of being a spiritual person. I have always been a spiritual person. I'm from a religious family. My grandmother was a pastor, she was a reverend. And so that's where I get hints that just came full circle in life to me. I never saw myself as becoming one, but when I lost my nephew, there was so many questions that I had. and trying to understand how such something so traumatic and senseless could happen to people who are like pillars in their community and always trying to do the right thing by individuals. And then me being diagnosed with this illness, I was like, as much help as I pour into my community, I couldn't believe that this one thing that was happening to me. But then I also had to, and going through this spiritually and refinding myself and centering myself in my faith spiritually, it allowed me to realize that this was bigger than me and this wasn't happening. It wasn't happening to me because I did something. It was just something that was happening, and it was something that I had to navigate through. And so that was the spiritual part of it because it allowed me to begin to find that connection with God again. And I believe that that's for anyone, no matter who, whatever your faith is. Sometimes you need to just take a step back and just understand that there's a higher power than you, and recognize, however that be, there's always a blessing in whatever lesson. It's just up to you to figure out, are you going to accept this as a lesson and learn from it and understand that there's a blessing that can come from it, or are you going to allow a situation to continue to victimize you and have you in this survivor mode of everything is happening to me and there's nothing that I can do to come out of it. And so that was my spiritual journey through that. And then practically, it was, what can I do to ensure that someone doesn't have to necessarily feel like they're going through this alone. I kept coming back to, there has to be something tangible that's going to come to this, that is going to leave this legacy, that's going to leave a legacy for me, but then also is going to be a tool that someone else can pick up and use and say like, hey, somebody's been through this already. Maybe I can learn from what that person's been through. And so that's what the book was for me. The finished part of the book was, yes, it checked the box of legacy, but it also checked the box of something tangible that others can learn from. And so that's why I didn't name it like The Life of Xenia Barnes. It was all about grieving to heal. And because that's what I was generally doing, I was grieving in order so I can process and begin to heal. But then also my other book, The Recondition, The Guide to Loving Yourself Through the Trauma, is it's a roadmap. It's an actual roadmap of different tools and strategies that you can use right away that don't necessarily cost you money, things that are at your fingertips. And it's something that individuals can do without breaking the bank. I wanted to make sure I had things that was accessible to individuals who may not have financially be in a place that they can seek, whether it is to pay for a psychiatrist or pay or have insurance that will cover their therapy sessions. These are tools that I've learned through my therapy session, through research, through different things, expert, textbook, all those things. I compile them all into one place that says like, hey, this is, not only can you just take this, but this is how it worked for me, and these are different ways that you can try to incorporate it into your life and make it meaningful for you. And I think that's what sets my books apart from others, because it's not just a go-to or how-to. It shows you how it actually works for someone, but then it also leaves these journaling spaces so that you can process along the way. And I think that was the most important practical part for me, making sure that people can process along the way.
I love that so much. I think it's amazing that you decided to, instead of just sharing your own experience, you were like, okay, and let me give you the space to come along with me on this journey. And it's so beautiful. Now, I heard the term shadow boarding. Can you kind of explain what that is?
Awesome. I was waiting for it. I kept looking. I kept saying, well, when are they going to ask me about shadowboarding? Okay, so shadowboarding. Shadowboarding is very similar to vision boarding, but this is what's so powerful about shadowboarding. Shadowboarding allows you to shed all the things that have been holding you back. So it's all the things, the negative things that you've been telling yourself, self-sabotaging, mobbing at work, uh, all of the labeling, all the different things that have been weighing you down. This is where you're dumping all those things and you're creating this pathway of the things that have not allowed you to be the best version of yourself. It's allowing you to identify relationships that didn't necessarily serve you the best way that they should have. It's allowing you to identify um, people, places, and things that do not allow you to be the best version of yourself. It may be sense, it may make you feel uncomfortable. It may be something that you experience, but it's the different things that you went through in your life that is now you're saying, you know what, I'm not willing to take this into the next chapter with me. So the shadowboarding experience allows you to compile all those things. Now that you have them, it's like, okay, so what do I do now? The shadowboarding experience allows you to recognize what has triggered you, what has allowed you to stay in that place, but it also gives you a pathway, understanding of I can let this go. I do not have to hold on to this. And so I am making the conscious decision and effort to do away with this. I'm closing this chapter. I named it, I identified it, and my so what now? My call to action is to release it. And so that's what the shadowboarding experience does. It takes you through a journey of shedding all those different things. And it's a roller coaster. It opens some wounds, but it also allows you to transition from survivor mode to thriver mode. Because when you're in survivor mode, you're stuck in fear, you're stuck in fight or flight, and you lose that capability of identifying who do you have in your circle of trust that can help you rationally think. And so the shadowboarding experience is about understanding and identifying who your circle of trust is, who are the people and the relationships that helps you get to a calmer place in your life, and that helps you rationally think in unrational moments. And then once you come out of that, then you're ready to begin the beginning. You're ready to begin the stages of opening a new chapter. You're ready to accept that you're deserving of love. You're ready to accept that, you know what, this is no longer working for me. I'm going to polish my resume. It gives you actionable steps. I'm going to polish my resume because I recognize that I'm unhappy here. And it shakes up that comfortability of I'm just gonna be here because it pays the bills. It shakes up that comfortability of I'm gonna be here just because this person knows me, or maybe because I feel like I'm indebted to this relationship because at one point they were so loving, or this relationship was so loving and kind. But you have to recognize that everything runs its course, and sometimes something that started off so great doesn't always end so great. And you have to not feel guilty about choosing you. And that's what the shadowboarding experience is about. It forces you to choose you. It forces you to recognize that if I do not do the self inventory and begin to understand what I need and begin to understand what love looks like, sounds like, and feels like to me, for me, to take care of home, to take care of myself mentally, emotionally, and physically, then I'm no good to anyone else around me because I'm going to continue to accept things that goes against my boundaries. I'm going to continue to lower my expectations. I'm going to continue to allow people to use me, take advantage of me, because I don't feel like I'm deserving of those things, or I feel like I owe everything to someone else. And when you feel like you're continuously owing someone, you're in a relationship out of obligation, and you're not in that relationship, whether it's a work relationship, whether it is family relationship, whether it is an intimate relationship, you feel like you're working out of obligation, and you're not putting yourself first, and you're not doing the best for that other person.
So, this is a side question. I'm curious. This is more for me. You know how when people kind of die,
Mhm.
they have an interaction. Did you by chance have something happen to you?
I think for me it was, and I don't know if it was an interaction, but I do feel like like I said, there was this calm that came over me where I didn't feel fearful anymore. And I think that was the interaction for me. I think it was that peacefulness for me. And so all before that happened, I was so panicked and I was so afraid of what was to come. But after that situation, it was like this calm and peace that came over me that I don't know. I can't even explain what it did for me. I just know that it removed so much fear to where I was okay. I was like, okay, all right, so I'm gonna listen. What is it that I have to do next? Like I'm gonna listen. What is it that what you're trying to tell me something. I'm not sure what it is, but you're trying to tell me something. But it allowed me to be still. And before so I was being so reactive. I think that's the better way of saying it. I was being so reactive. But after that happened, I found myself being proactive. So I think for me, I think that was an interaction that happened. I know I didn't see like some big bold light, like I didn't see gates open, I didn't hear a song playing, but I did feel a different sense of calmness.
So that's interesting because that is almost identical to my experience, where for me it was like I was warm and there was so much peace and just like I was there, like
Hmm.
that's it. And there was nothing. I mean, it wasn't dark, it wasn't light. There was nothing. It was just pure peace.
Hmm.
Like your body is completely warm. You're completely like I don't know. I've never heard anyone else describe it that way. That's that's incredible.
Great.
And then you heard your mom calling out to you, like, come back, come back, come back.
Yes.
And then you kind of went to that.
Right.
Oh, that's so neat. Thank you for sharing. Sorry, that was my curiosity.
No.
So, helping others in community building. So, how has your work been received by people dealing with chronic illness or trauma?
Okay. So I've also written a couple of other books, which allows me to help organizations and so what that work is, I'm training leaderships and organizations how to be more trauma informed leaders so that they're helping people who are experiencing forms of trauma, long-term disability, long-term illnesses, um, and survivors of like gun violence and domestic abuse. And so with that being said, I have the Courageous Pursuit of Authenticity is an anthology where it's 8 phenomenal women, including myself, and we're all sharing our stories from different walks of life about navigating different workspaces and the different challenges that we experience. And so, going through that process, that has allowed me to recognize that whether you're sick or not, there's so many different things that women in general face in the workforce that we don't get to communicate with each other because society continues to pin us against each other. And it allowed an opportunity where voices were able to come together and say, not anymore. And let's create this space and this change for women where they begin to feel comfortable about voicing their needs in the workspace. Um, and just reaching out to other women to be courageous in who they are, uh, as well as pointing out and calling out the workforce and saying, we're here, we're not going anywhere, and our voice matters. So that's how I've been shaping in the sense of workforce. But then I also have 2 other anthologies, which are labeled Triumph in the Trenches. And so in volume one, I began to tell my story of being a black woman in the school system and being constantly met with my experience being challenged, my my capabilities being challenged, questions about like my degrees and my certifications, and it's like my competency should not be in question when I'm hired to do a job that I'm qualified to do. When I've shown that I'm capable of doing this, because you feel threatened by my intellect as a woman of color, you want me to dumb down my voice, you want me to dumb down my opinions, unless you're asking me questions about other black families. And that's what I was constantly met with in that role. And so that's why that's what my chapter is about. But then also, Volume 2 allows me to shape and mold leaders to understand like the invisible disabilities and the discomfort that people face when you have an invisible disability. And I keep saying that term because if I don't have my oxygen on, you don't know that I'm fully disabled. If I don't have my oxygen on, you don't know that I need a double lung transplant, or I have lupus, or I suffer from chronic pain. And so with the book shares insight into that and what it looks like for survivors of gun violence and domestic abuse to come into work and be forcefully met with icebreakers and sunshine committee parties and all these things. And you're saying, well, I don't feel like you're part of this community because you don't want to come to these birthday parties. And it's like, but that's not what I was hired to do. So how does that make me incapable of doing my job because I don't want to participate in happy birthday songs, or I don't want to, I don't know, or the neurodivergent who cannot function with a whole lot of noise and everyone standing by her desk or his desk clapping and banging keys and doing all these things because it's like, oh, we're about to go to happy hour, you're not coming, you know. So it teeters on all those different things, but it also highlights how everyone, no matter who you are, have experienced some form of trauma, and we're all doing the best that we can, and that's what we lead with. We lead our life, whether you think so or not. You lead your life and your interactions based off some form of trauma, whether you process it or not. So, how you interact with people or how you feel when someone says something that makes you uncomfortable always triggers a negative experience and goes back to something that you already had. So, where I can say something with the best intentions, if you have been someone who is like a survivor of domestic abuse or a survivor of being with a narcissist for many of years, the way it impacts you can be completely different from the way I intended it, just because that's a place that you're so used to operating from. And so that's what Triumph in the Trenches does. It highlights that, but it also, again, gives different tools and strategies of how you can identify those things, how you name it, how you call it out, and how you interact with people and call them in to making a change about it. And so to answer your question, that's how that's how I've been operating from that place of we have enough awareness. It's time for us to cause action. It's time for us to do something. And so that's what I've been doing. I've been holding people accountable. I've been holding businesses accountable, organizations, and I've been met with opening arms in so many different areas, because it's almost like people are saying it's like we've been waiting for this, we just didn't know how to express and say that we've been waiting for this. But then you also, like life and anything else, have those other individuals or organizations who is like, this is not for us now. Because when you're holding people accountable, you also have to recognize that there's someone who's at fault for something. And when I'm in charge of making the bigger decisions, and that's where these decisions come from the top, from leadership, it's not that easy to show that I've been contributing to psychological warfare on people. It's not that easy to acknowledge that I've been contributing to an unsafe work environment. And so you are met with some resistance, but from my experience, I've been met with more of a welcome of how can I be an ally and support, and how can I do the best for my organization. And I guess that could be because that's who I tend to gravitate to, individuals who are already ready to make change. But I also let those who are not ready yet know that I'm here. And if you know when you're ready, eventually you'll have to be ready or you're not going to have any employees, right? But when you're ready, there's something out there for you. And sometimes I even just gift them with a book and say like, hey, maybe this is something you should read and see what comes for it for you, and then let's have a discussion later. I don't force myself on individuals, but I do let them know that it's an option. The work that I do is an option.
I love that. I love that you've switched it into the corporate world. I think that's it's so interesting because having been in the corporate world, I was in HR when I was sick, and it was a very challenging experience. And even now, being back and dealing with chronic illness and disability and all of that, it is nice to feel seen.
Mhm.
And I think it's beautiful that you're giving them an avenue to see people again, creating that space. And you're incredible.
Thank you.
So, real quick before we go, what advice would you give someone who feels stuck in their pain and they don't know where to begin their healing journey?
I would say that's a beautiful question. It's a question I often get. I always say, write it down. Write it down because often we are holding these things in, and we're expecting someone else to automatically know. But when you don't know exactly what it is that you're feeling, and you don't know exactly why you're stuck, no one else can know. So write it down, even if it's just for yourself. If you're not a writer, record it in your voice notes, and then play it back to yourself a couple of days later so that you can have that aha moment and you could begin to identify and process what it is that you would be doing and then start that dialect of what it is that I need so that I can begin to feel better. Now is the time for you to be selfish. Now is the time for you to say, I need to do something different because I want something different. And I have this saying, if you want something different, then do something different. If you continue to do the same thing, then nothing's going to change. And so that starts with looking within. That starts with even if you're looking in the mirror and you're just saying to yourself every day, and this is something that I had to do, so I know that it works. It's like, I love you. I love you. And I said it until I began to believe it. You are awesome. You are such a beautiful person. You belong here. You are enough. You are deserving. And the more I began to say those things, the more I began to believe. It was like, yes, you girl, yes, girl, you are. You are deserving. Like, especially someone who experienced being in a domestic violence relationship. Like, there are things that are stripped away from you when you've been in those type of situations that you have to rebuild. And so taking a moment to rebuild that within yourself, I would say whether you are battling grief, whether you are battling self sabotage, which is a real thing, or whether you are battling a long term illness. If you are unsure, spend at least 5 minutes in the mirror reaffirming yourself that you are deserving, you are capable, and you deserve to know what love feels like, know what love looks like, know what it sounds like. And if no one else is giving it to you, create it yourself.
I absolutely love that. I think affirmations are so vital to creating the person that we want to be. Now, we always end with this question. So, being in the red, negative, being in the black means putting yourself in a positive position in your life. So, for you personally, what does being in the black look like for you?
For me personally, being in the black, woo, okay, being in the black for me looks like real self care. And I don't mean manicures, pedicures, those things are lovely, they're lovely, but I mean actual self care. And the point for me is like going on a vacation, whether it be, and it doesn't have to be super expensive, it doesn't have to be long, but just time for me to go and be in a space where I can have music on a low tone and just writing, whether it's a short story, whether it's poetry, whether it's a new novel, but just that time that is for me, that time that I could spend where it's like I don't have to give to anyone, or I don't have anyone asking me for a bunch of things. I'm not face down with a bunch of doctor's appointments, but just some time to just be peaceful. That is what being in the black means because it allows me to recognize that I'm not working to die anymore. I'm working to live.
I love that. For our audience, many of our listeners are navigating life transitions or struggling with self-worth, what's one small thing they can do today to start reconditioning themselves with self-love?
So one thing they can start doing is doing a bit of self inventory and understanding, and I will keep saying this till I'm blue in the face, understanding what love looks like, sound like, and feel like to them. We all have a different definition of love, and often we're looking from it from outwards, but it really starts inwards. And once you can understand what love feels like to you, and understand that you already have it within yourself, that anything anybody else brings to the table is extra, and you become okay with that. So understanding what makes you happy, make you a list of the things that brings joy to your face, the things that make you belly laugh, like childhood belly laugh, the people who you're around when you're the most happiest. What can you do that wouldn't cost you any money, that will let you feel like, you know what, I had a really great day. Like making a laundry list of those things are is a starting point for you to begin to shift your mindset, but also begin to shift the whole balance of what happiness looks like for you.
I think that's amazing. Making that list of little things. I remember doing that in the shelter and thinking about how many things I actually enjoyed, even though me and the kids were living in a shelter. And so, speaking of that, what does advocacy look like to you now? And how can anyone, no matter what their health, no matter what their situation, how can they become a source of light for other people?
Ooh, that is so great. That is such a great one, because many people get confused and they think that with advocacy, you have to have a lot of money or you have to have so many connections. And that's so untrue. That's such a misconception. You can, and nowadays of technology and social media, you can use your authentic voice to just turn on your social media, go live, and share what you're feeling in that moment for that day. You don't have to share your location, you don't have to go too deep into your situation, but there's someone out there who is experiencing something similar. No one is going through anything alone. It may feel like you are, but trust me, you're not. And for example, I realized with myself, I started recording my journeys on the way to the doctors because I recognized that every day I had a doctor's appointment, those would be my high anxiety days. So what I would do is on my way to the doctor, on the cab ride there, I would just go on my Facebook, social media, and I would say like, "Hey guys, today's the day I'm going to see X doctor. There's the pulmonologist today. Not sure what news I'm going to get, but I'm feeling really anxious. And this is why I'm feeling anxious." And just going through that, and I recognized there were so many comments that started coming through and saying like, "Oh my gosh, I feel that way when I go to the doctor. My mom has said that, my cousin, you know." And then I started being connected to different people who were feeling anxious about going to the doctor, and then they started leaving tips. So this is what I do when I feel anxious, and it was like this whole community of people just came together just from that one post that was about, I want to say it wasn't even a 1 minute, it was about 36 seconds of me just saying like, this is how I felt, and a community came from that, people that from all over the place that I didn't even necessarily know. And so that was one way of advocacy. Also, just don't be afraid to ask for help, because your ability and willingness to ask for help often inspires a movement. It inspires other people to want to support not only you but to support others. And so with you being open to sharing your story, it allows you to touch people that you have no idea that you will be touching. And often it's the closest people to you, because people are living together but living separate lives, and they're moving in different directions just because no one wants to, um, they don't want to overwhelm the next person, so they're all in the same space going through something without communicating with one another. So just having an open sense of willingness to communicate what you're going through and being okay with asking for help allows you to touch so many others, and that is the beginning stages of advocacy.
Love that. And where can our listeners find you?
Oh, if you're looking for me, You can find me on Facebook as RDB Speaks. That's Reverend Dr. Bond Speaks. It's just like I said it, RDB Speaks. On all other social media platforms, I am Coach Barnes, like the bookstore, my last name, GMT underscore. So that's Coach Barnes, GMT underscore.
Well, thank you so much for coming on our podcast and also giving me the tip at the beginning. I will definitely work on that and send it to you by the end of the week. I really enjoyed our conversation. You are doing amazing things. I hopefully, do you know if you are on the contact list to get your lung or
So I've actually been accepted into the lung transplant program, and so what that means is it's a super long process. But what that means is that they're gonna keep monitoring me every 3 to 6 months because they want to maximize the capacity that I have in these lungs, which is my birth given lungs. And that's just because I need two lungs. If I only needed one, then I would have been able to dig it so quickly. But because the process is so strenuous on the body, they want to maximize what little bit I do have in mind before they do the double lung transplant. So keep me in your prayers.
yeah,
I'm in the program, and um, there has to be more. There has to be more.
Well, thank you
absolutely.
so much for coming on today. I really enjoyed getting to know you a little bit and listening to your story, and I can't wait to see where it goes.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, and invite me back anytime. I will always make time for you ladies.
Aw, thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of In the Black. I hope today's story left you feeling inspired and reminded of the incredible strength that lies in each of us. Our guest today has taken her toughest challenges and transformed them into something beautiful, reminding us all that even in the darkest moments, there's always a way to find light in the world.
If you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to subscribe and share In the Black with another woman who could use a little encouragement. Together, we're building a community of passion, purpose, and power. Until next time, stay strong, stay inspired, and remember, your story matters. Your choices change things, and being your most authentic self can and will change the world around you.